If I've learned anything from agonizing over trying to find the perfect Tinder profile byline, it's that sometimes you just got to keep it simple and go with what you know is going to work. I wish I would have done that on guitar, okay? So I'm going to share some stuff with you that I have just kind of now recently learned, trying to do something way more complicated that I wish I would have done as a beginner, and I think it'll definitely help beginners kind of jump into lead playing. So we're going to talk about one super easy shape that's really going to help you out, and then also why just beginners kind of struggle playing lead in general, okay? So this is the shape we're going to learn. It's going to be open 2-4, open 2-4, open 2-4. All right, you start on the E string, hit it open, go to the 2nd fret, go to the 4th fret. Use whatever finger you want. Use one finger and slide it. Work on that stretch. Work on that stretch. Doesn't matter. And then do the same thing on the A string and the D string. You've just played all the notes of A major, okay? So that might be kind of counterintuitive to think about because you're starting on E and it's like, all right, well, you're going to confuse everybody if it's like, oh, play A major, the A major scale, the notes in it, and start there. Well, I think the brilliance of learning it this way and why I think this will help a lot of people is because of the shape, okay? Guitar is an instrument of shapes, and a lot of times when you think of like learning something shape-wise, for a lead or solo playing, we go to like minor pentatonic or some kind of pentatonic shape, right? Like 5-8, 5-7, 5-7, 5-7, 5-8, 5-8, and then you start soloing with that, okay? Now the issue with that, well, first let's talk about the positives. The positives is that every note or every string has just 2 notes. So it's kind of easy. You almost have like a left note and a right note if I'm looking down at it, right? Like top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom, right? But what I have experienced a lot with just different students I've taught, because I'm like everybody else, I teach pentatonics to beginners and stuff. Probably not anymore though, is I can hear them. Instead of using their ear to solo, they're using the shape to solo. So, you know, maybe if they're playing something in A minor, like I'll just do like a super simple, like just A minor guitar loop, like right? And then it's like, okay, I'm gonna solo. Then maybe switch. And it's like, that doesn't really sound like a music. It doesn't sound musical at all because I can hear and see them using the shape instead of using their ears, okay? Now what this guy right here, this super, super simple shape does is allows you to not have to use your brain to visualize where your fingers are going, and then you can kind of like flow around in between them, right? So, A major, the notes in A major, you don't have to remember this, it definitely helps, are A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, and A, okay? Now, what I've been doing recently for this channel for this entire month is kind of reteaching myself the fretboard in the 3 notes per string method to kind of just get better at like shredding, okay? So what that does is what I used to do is like, all right, A major, I'd go middle, pinky, index, ring, pinky, and I have this shape, right? And I got really good at this shape. But that's like a very complicated shape, especially for a beginner, because you have one interval here, you have a whole step, then you switch, then you use a different fingering, pointer middle, then a different fingering, you repeat that, then the first one again, then yet like another. So it's like there's different fingerings all throughout there, okay? If you were to play that same scale, 3 notes to string wise, you would get 5, 7, 9, 5, 7, 9, 6, 7, 9. Okay? So, with the exception of that one note right here, we have this really, really easy shape that you can link in different parts, which I'm going to demonstrate for the rest of this video. All right? Let's start just with these first 2 strings, okay? Now this might be a huge reach for somebody just starting out on a guitar, right? A whole step, 2 frets, and then another whole step, 2 frets. But it's more about being able to visualize this in your head and then thinking about it, or even not having to think about it when you're trying to play music with it, right? This is a super easy shape. Like even if you have like a graphic right here, it just shows how easy that shape is because of the symmetry. And then we're gonna talk about how just movable it is, all right? So now, when I said we're in the A major scale, but we started playing open E, open 2 4, open 2 4, open 2 4. This is like the whole key that I'm kind of basing this concept around. Is like, all right, E is a very important note in the key of A. A, B, C, D, E. It's the 5. If you don't understand like the numbers, definitely check out the Patreon because I go into like much greater detail about breaking down like chords and numbers and stuff like that. But just know that in the key of A, E is a very important note and chord. In any key, the 5th note away from it is super important. There's an unnatural pull, or a natural pull, however you want to look at that, between those two spots. All right? Now, the great thing about playing 3 notes of string is if you find an E, and then like we already did it on this one, let's do it in a different spot. Let's find the 7th fret on the A string is an E. Our pattern is going to look like this to play those same notes. 7, 9, 11. Repeat that same thing a string down, and repeat that same thing a string down. 7, 9, 11, 7, 9, 11, 7, 9, 11. Basically, you have a starting point, and then you have 2 frets higher and 2 frets higher, and then that repeats those subsequent strings, okay? So now you can start playing around in that shape. You don't have to stick to the same fingering. Now, if you're doing it for shredding purposes, the fingering is definitely very important. But if you're doing it for just kind of exploratory purposes, which is how beginners start to kind of unlock the fretboard, then it's a lot easier to do. So it's like, all right, we'll start here, and then just kind of like just play around. Maybe start combining different notes. And it's like right there, that just mindless noodling sounds so much more musical than minor pentatonic stuff, in my opinion. You can definitely come at me in the comments if you want. Would love to hear it. But I really think that just kind of like seeing this one shape is so much more musical, and you can do so much more with it. Just kind of exploring around and then just having a touchstone to begin with, and then kind of basing everything off that one spot, okay? Now, the reason that this pertains to A, the main key that we're in, is it's essentially the same shape. You start the exact same way, but then when you get to that 3rd string, you make one correction, okay? This is where the major 7th interval of the key is. Again, I don't even want to get too far into it because that's not what it's about. Like, definitely, of course, it helps to know that, like, a G sharp is the 7th note in the key of A. You can turn that into a major 7 chord, etc., etc. But for the purposes of just seeing the fretboard, I wish I would have done this first because you can still kind of play around with it. And then just kind of see it within the context of one shape and a small alteration. And even if you get that alteration wrong, it's not a huge deal. Like if we play the open 2 4, open 2 4, open 2 4, but start on the A string, it's just that open G string, which isn't in the key, that sounds a little bit off, but when you're flying, it doesn't really even make that much of a difference, okay? Now, I think the biggest eye-opening thing, and something that I never even really understood until I really took some time with this, is just how easy this is when it comes to the first 6 notes of both of these shapes and how they lay up across the higher set of strings, okay? Now, what you notice is we haven't gone to the B string of the guitar yet because that's where it's like a lot of the symmetry from these shapes end because, again, the B string is tuned differently than the other strings, right? So we have to compensate for the B string. No. I don't think so. I've always been of the mind like, all right, learn your shape, and then when you get to the B string, compensate, go diagonal 1. But I think if we just use this kind of touchstone method, it makes a lot more sense. All right. So again, we've got 2 shapes here. We've got the A shape and the E shape. And again, it's just starting note, 2 frets, 2 frets, down a string, same thing, right? If you take the first 6 notes, you'll notice they're identical. It's only that 7th note that is different, okay? In music theory terms, we would say that E, or the 5th note in any key, has a flat 7 compared to the root note. That's what makes those 2 kind of scale shapes different. That would be a mode of each other, if you guys have ever heard that term before. That's very confusing for people. But if we start thinking about it, all right, just those first 6 notes, there's no difference. Those are just the same intervals that give us all the notes, okay? So on the B string, let's find the E, okay? So we count through the notes either by going B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, getting to the 5th fret. There's our E. We can do that same shape. Okay, just the first 6 notes. And again, you don't have to do it all with one big reach like this. You can still... kind of explore around in there because, like, let's face it, usually in guitar solos, you end up in the higher register of strings. It's like, all right, so cool. That same shape applies to the higher notes starting on that B string, rooting that note on the B string. Let's see where the A is, okay? I always think it's almost easier to count backwards because, again, this is the B string, the octave, that 12th fret is where the next B is, and then go back down, B flat, A. So the 10th fret is where your A is. And remember, we said the first 6 notes are exactly the same shape. So here's a root note, a whole step, and then repeat the same thing there, okay? So now we have 2 starting points where it's just the root note, 2 frets higher, 2 frets higher, and then repeated. There's the E, and here's the A. E, A. So right there, by using the same shape and having 2 starting points, you actually get the entirety of the scale across the strings, okay? And that kind of takes into all of like the interval training. Like if you ever heard of like, okay, the major scale is just like whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Well, this is exactly what you would get if you started on A, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half into it. But again, we're just thinking it as 2 different shapes, and those half steps are exactly where those shapes connect, okay? So by learning really one shape, you cover so much ground on the fretboard. You just have to know where an E is and where an A is, and then all of the stuff will be movable relative to each other in any other key. You just know where the 1 and the 5 is, right? We can start just by flying through. So those are all the notes right here in this spot. I can find the next one. Here's A. All the notes right there. I could go to the open A string. There's all the spots there. I can go to the E on the A string. There's all the spots right there. I can go to the octave A for either of these. I can go high up. I can move that like we just did. And it just repeats. And then essentially, you have all the notes in this entire key laid out just from one shape. And I think that's just like super, super easy to do. Way, way better than being like, here's the Ionian mode, and that sits right next to the Dorian mode. And then you go into Phrygian, and then you go into Lydian and Mixed Lydian. All that stuff is great when you want to like try to capture a certain sound, but all that stuff is so, so confusing for beginners to get into. So that's why I really think that this is the best way for beginners to start thinking about soloing. Forget about pentatonics, unless you really are in love with the sound of pentatonic solos, which definitely has a certain sound. But would anybody ever think that way? I just really want to get into guitar just to play the sound of pentatonic solos, because you're gonna sound like pretty much everybody else out there. I love pentatonics. I'm not hating on pentatonics. It's like they've got like just kind of like an at-home feel that you can really kind of fly through. But even stacking 5 pentatonic shapes and navigating between them, I think is more difficult than actually taking the full scale, all 7 notes, and then just learning it with one shape and then just having kind of touchstones to like learn where those notes start. And then again, when you transfer it into other keys, it's going to be really, really easy. So again, that's my best advice, is to just take that shape, whether it's just the first 6 notes or if it's actually 9 notes across 6 strings, or 3 strings, right? Like, again, that A with the alteration. Go for it if you want. And then just really start by maybe like striking the root note and then kind of back home, maybe in a different one. just really play along and then teach your mind to see just that really easy shape. Even if it's way outside your reach, just have your mind kind of anchor those touchstone points, and then you'll kind of get back to it. And that's something that, like, in hindsight, I see a lot of, like, really good guitar players that I kind of idolized when I was first coming up. I would see them do these kind of runs where they'd kind of do these, like, full step slides and then always end up on the root. And I was like, well, that's interesting. I always thought it was like, oh, they're going between two shapes. But really, it's one shape that's slightly more extended than I had seen before. And they're just kind of like just using it as context for their fingers to kind of fly through it. And that's going to be the best way to build speed. And it's going to set you up for like way more complicated and advanced stuff, which I'm going to be tackling on the channel coming up soon in the next couple of weeks. And I've already started on the Patreon. So definitely stay tuned for that. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to share that in the context of a beginner, because it's really easy to kind of just play those open those hammer-ons, you know, like the double hammer-on. I'm gonna do another video on that, just like the joy of the double hammer-on and how it makes you sound like you're super fast even if you're not. Because again, it's a lot of fun. Any beginner can do it. That reach isn't so bad, especially if it's just your pointer finger to your pinky, and then just visualizing that all over the fretboard. All right, so rocking the D'Angelico Deluxe SS out. This is the official Emerald Rider guitar, if anybody asks. But yeah, that's all I've got for you today. Please let me know if you have any questions or comments in the comment section. And then go follow me over on Instagram, Twitter, and like I said, check out the Patreon. And I will talk to you guys soon. Thanks a lot.